Nick Durant here with Tattoo University, and today I'm going to show you how to make a foot pedal out of saw blades. Here's one that I made for myself, and it's actually got a piece of an old foot pedal that didn't work on there. I'm going to show you how you can take two rusty old saw blades and make a really cool foot pedal. Now recently I bought this foot pedal and I paid $20-something for this. This was supposed to be a better quality foot pedal, and I immediately started having problems with it. Unfortunately, they sell a lot of equipment, and it's not always cheap, but it doesn't work correctly a lot of the times. If I go through a company, I want to make sure that they will reimburse me if I get a piece of equipment that I don't like. So what I like to do if something doesn't work is take it apart, see what exactly was wrong with this. Because what happens is the people who are making these don't know about tattooing and what it takes to tattoo. This is just probably somebody in a warehouse somewhere slapping these things together. So let's take this apart and see what's wrong with it. Now I'm going to use these parts from this foot pedal for my new pedal, but you can make a brand new one with a phone plug, a couple of saw blades, a piece of yoga mat. You need 2 bolts for a toilet seat with the nuts, and some washers, some plastic washers for a hose, and some wire and a little antioxidant compound. What I'm going to do is take this cord, because it's probably a good cord, and just use that and toss this cheap piece right here. What's nice about these saw blades is there's a big area here for you to put your foot. And a lot of times your foot pedal will kind of crawl away from you because it's really light and it'll move around, but these have a lot of weight. And you can step on these from the front, you can step on it from the side, you step on it in the middle, wherever, and it'll work. I bought this and it immediately wasn't working correctly. And it seems like I've bought several foot pedals that always just seem to break. But every time I make a foot pedal, it lasts for a really long time. I made this foot pedal out of a tap light. You just step on it and it turns on, step on it and it turns off. I've had that tap light for years and it still works. I did the video for you guys on how to make that a couple of years back. So if you make a foot pedal that's homemade, it's probably going to last you a lot longer than if you buy one of these foot pedals from the dealers. So, unless the entire thing is cheap, I won't throw things away. Usually I try to reuse the parts. Or you don't ever want metal to touch on your foot pedal unless you want your foot pedal to be running. You can see already that these are metal screws, and that could be part of your issues already. They have these plastic washers that are supposed to keep them from touching the metal, but a lot of times, because these are so cheap, it doesn't work out. We are going to use a plastic bolt and a plastic nut. That way we don't have to worry about these connecting when we don't want them to connect. So that could have been the issue. Pop this open and see what we have here. So what you have is two pieces of metal, and you connect one of your wires to one piece of metal, and then you connect another wire to your other piece of metal. These plastic washers are supposed to keep these two pieces of metal separate like this until you step on it, and they make a connection and it's supposed to turn on. So you want to make sure they don't connect until you step on it, and then you want to make sure when you step on it that you get a good connection. Here's a couple of saw blades that I had sitting around in my backyard. They originally looked like this when they're brand new. And then I use them and I let them sit out there and rust a little bit, give them a little bit of character. And we want to keep this rusty look. The top one is for wood. It's got these points on it. But the bottom one is actually for concrete. And I like these because they're round. You don't just want to use a rusty saw blade without treating it. So if you want that rusty look, you want to spray your blades with a sealant. You can use this clear gloss, and even this is a pretty cool paint. It's glow in the dark. You can't see it. It's clear, but it also glows in the dark. But what it does is it keeps your blades from rusting more. You want to have that rusty look, but you don't want them actually rusting on you because that'll cause issues. You can see I've drilled a couple of holes through both of these. If you look at the back of this, you can see where I marked out my lines. What I did was I marked through the center of this circle both directions so that I could make sure that everything was centered, and then I just measured down a little ways to make sure that my bolts were far enough from the edge but not too far in. And then I just made sure they were equal distances apart from each other. And then I drilled the holes. I put these together after I marked the top, and I drilled them both together like this to make sure they lined up. Now this is the bottom part, so I just flip this over and you won't see those lines that I put in there anymore. And you want to make sure your blades line up on the outside so you get a perfect circle. Now what we're going to do is take our plastic bolts and we're going to put them through the bottom. Now remember, we need a space in between the blades. So I'm going to put the washers down. You can use these same washers. I just happen to have two of these and two of these. Now with your wires, you need one touching the bottom and one touching the top. When you drill these holes, make sure you use a drill bit that's just big enough to fit this bolt in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually attach this wire to the base here to make sure we have a really good connection. So first of all, I need to sand this down, scuff it up a little bit so that the solder and the wire will stick to this. You know, we put that clear coat on there, so we need to remove that to make sure that our solder sticks really good. Okay, so now we got a little wire to work with. Let's stick that through the back, and I like to wrap it around the bolt down here. Now I'm not going to show you how to wire these together as far as the cord goes, because I already have several videos out there that show you how to wire up a clip cord. It's the same thing. A little flux, get a little ball of solder on that. Till that sticks on there. And then I'm going to run a little solder on my wire. We don't want any of this wire to oxidize. And this process just kind of makes everything easier to connect. So we cover that wire as much as possible. And now I'm just going to solder this to this right here. And then I'm going to throw my gasket on top of that, or plastic washer, whatever you're using. And now I need to do the same process, but to my other saw blade here. And this wire is going to go to the bottom plate. This wire is going to go to the top plate on the opposite side. Now what I like to do is wrap the cord around the bolt one time. Now what that's going to do is if somebody yanks on your cord, it's not going to yank right here. It's just going to pull on this part, which is a lot stronger, and that's going to prevent your solder from being pulled loose. Now I'm going to do the same thing to this other side too, but on this side I'm going to put the washer on top. On this side I'm putting the washer on the bottom. Now that part's a little tricky because you have to solder this on here, but still leave enough wire to wrap this around and then slide this over your bolt like so. Now before I did this, I put some antioxidant compound on the wires. Even though I soldered them, we want to make sure that those wires don't get oxidized and rust and break, because then your foot pedal is not going to work. We want this to last as long as possible, so we soldered those wires and put a little ox guard on it. You need to have a little bit of a gap in between these two plates so they don't touch until you put a little pressure and step on it. Okay, so I cut off the tops of these and sanded that down. You never want to have anything sharp or pokey in a tattoo shop, except for the needles, of course. What we want to do next is take this piece of yoga pad and I'm going to push it onto the back so that we can see where these little ends of the bolts are going to hit on the pad here. You see these little circles here, the little indentation, and we're just going to cut that. Got a little hole right there. You don't have to cut it out totally. You can just cut like a little X right there just so that the bolt will fit in there. So once you get that so that it fits around that bolt there, we want to cut anything off that might be sticking up in the way. What happens is a lot of shops might have like wood floors or floors that are nice and they don't want them screwed up. So you want to protect the floor by putting this padding on the back of this. And then after that, we are going to take a little super glue here and make sure that this mat is securely glued to the back of this. Take it all the way out to the corners, go around these bolts, get enough super glue on here to make sure this thing sticks real good. And then put that back on there and make sure everything lines up. Something you can do with this also is take a little razor blade and just kind of cut out around these. Okay, so here is our final product, and let's see how it works. All I got to do is put a little pressure right here, or over here, or in the middle, or on the very tip. You can see it works. I really like this design. I like it because it's so wide and heavy a little bit so that it doesn't move across the floor while you're using it. Just remember, coat your metal so it doesn't rust. Make sure you wrap your wires around so your wires don't get pulled. Solder your wires and make sure that they don't get oxidized so that they rust. You don't want your metal rusting or your wires rusting. Put a pad on the back to make sure that you don't scuff up your floor if you have a nice floor, and make sure you use plastic instead of metal. Now if you do this right, you don't have to put a lot of pressure on this. Just a little bit of pressure. That way your foot doesn't get tired while you're tattooing, because you're just going to rest your foot on this. Now this is why I teach you guys the basics of everything, because if you know the basics, if you know why things work, you can make things like this. So you can take your basic foot pedal idea, find any two pieces of metal that conduct electricity, and turn it into a foot pedal. Once you know the basics of things, you can really start building up your own ideas and being creative, doing things on your own. Kind of like this right here. This is a little hand poker. I just made this out of parts that were laying out here in my garage. But I can maybe come up with a system for making these, just like I did with these foot pedals. And I can show you guys how to make little hand pokers like this. This is a lot better than just poking with a needle by itself. I did a video on this for hand poking where I use this, but I'll go into more details about this later and show you guys how to make some of these.